I'm 36, and if there's one thing I've learned about family, it's this. Being the reliable one means being invisible. My name is Elise, and growing up in the Thompson household, I was the problem solver, the one who made herself small so others could shine. And Daniel? Daniel was the star. From the moment he was born, he was golden. I remember being 7 and watching our mother hold him like he was made of glass, whispering promises into his soft, bald head while I stood forgotten at the doorway. I learned early on that love in our house wasn't unconditional, it was transactional, and I didn't have the right currency. Now here I was, 29 floors above the city, zipping up my blazer in the mirror, every detail of my outfit curated for tonight. Daniel's engagement party. I was already exhausted, not from the day, but from knowing exactly how this evening would go. He would glow, and I would be there, politely clapping from the sidelines. I'd helped pay for the venue. Quietly. Through a third party. Because Mom didn't want Daniel to know he needed help affording it. It would embarrass him, she said over the phone last month, as if my own contributions weren't worthy of recognition. And you don't need the credit, sweetheart. You're not that kind of person. Right. I'm not. I'm the kind of person who steps in when the bills pile up, who flies home during emergencies, who puts her own life on hold to make sure no one drowns. And in return, I get a seat at the kids' table and whispered comments about how career women always end up alone. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Don't be late, big night. I forced a smile. He didn't know, of course. About the sacrifices. About the way our parents had maneuvered every spotlight in his direction. He was too busy basking in it to notice I'd been standing in the shadows for 30 years. The memories came uninvited, like they always did before a family event. The time I won a statewide science fair and no one showed up. The birthday dinner that was canceled because Daniel had a stomachache. The whispered words to a neighbor at church. Daniel's so gifted. Elise just works too hard. Hard work. That's all I ever had. Degrees. Promotions. A restored estate left by Grandma that everyone assumed I was just staying in as a favor to the family. No one knew I bought it, renovated it, paid for every inch of that property myself with sleepless nights and investment wins no one cared to ask about. They think I rent a condo. They think I'm alone because I'm cold, not because I've been raised to believe love has to be earned through martyrdom. Tonight would be no different. I'd show up, smile, and disappear. That's how it's always been. But something inside me, something small and sharp, twitched as I grabbed my purse and keys. Not anger, not yet, but something. The Valmont Hotel was lit up like a movie set. Glass chandeliers glittering over valets in white gloves and guests swishing past in floor-length gowns. I stepped out of my rideshare, clutching my small gift bag with a vintage bottle of wine Daniel had once offhandedly said he liked. I doubted he even remembered. But I did. Inside, the air was thick with money and intention. Laughter floated from the grand ballroom where a string quartet played something elegant and empty. I was greeted by a smiling hostess who checked my name off the list like I was a stranger. Elise Thompson. Right this way. It stung more than I expected. She didn't recognize the name, the one on the anonymous donation invoice for the venue, the one that made tonight even possible. The ballroom looked like a page ripped out of a bridal magazine. Ivory roses, cascading lights, champagne flutes catching fire under the chandeliers. And there, in the center of it all, was Daniel. Tuxedo sharp, hair perfectly tousled, flashing that camera-ready smile as he stood beside Rachel, who looked every bit the flawless fiancée. Sweet, poised, exactly the kind of woman our mother prayed he'd end up with. "Elise," Daniel called, spotting me from across the room. He waved me over like a favorite cousin visiting from abroad, not the sister who paid the security deposit on this fairy tale. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it," I said, leaning in for a polite hug. Rachel gave me the same tight smile she always did. She looked me up and down, subtle but surgical. "I love your dress," she said, like it was a surprise. "Thanks." "You look beautiful," I replied, and meant it. She did. She always did. "Elise?" My mother's voice sliced through the air, chipper and already mildly disappointed. I thought you might have trouble finding the hotel, with your schedule. My schedule. That thing that apparently made me so unavailable for family events, unless they needed a check written. Nice to see you too, Mom, I said, kissing her cheek. Your dress is modern, she said, adjusting a phantom thread on my sleeve. But maybe a little serious for a party? You always did like darker colors. Dark colors hide wine stains, I offered with a smile I didn't feel. Just being practical. She laughed in that brittle way she did when she wasn't sure if I was joking or not. As I moved through the room, I noticed how the conversation shifted when I joined. Cousins talking about mortgages suddenly asked if I was still in that little apartment downtown. Old family friends gave polite nods, quickly pivoting the conversation toward Daniel's new promotion or Rachel's volunteer work. No one asked what I'd been working on. No one mentioned the company I just landed $1 million contract with. I wasn't here for that. I was here to clap, to blend, to not overshadow the golden boy. I found a quiet corner, drink in hand, watching Daniel move through the room like a politician at a rally, hugging, laughing, making eye contact with everyone, perfectly rehearsed. And yet, something in his eyes paused every time they landed on me. Not guilt, but something like it. Maybe discomfort. Maybe recognition. But recognition doesn't pay the bill. I did. I sipped my drink. This was his night. His crowd. His kingdom. And I was the invisible architect of the castle. Elise, come stand over here, where the light's better, Mom called out, waving her hand like she was directing traffic. I had just taken a bite of a smoked salmon canapé when she corralled me toward a group photo with the ladies of the family. Her tone was bright enough to be harmless, but I'd known her long enough to hear the subtext. She needed me in the picture, but not too visible. Not too central. We posed, and I was wedged in the back between Aunt Jean and Cousin Marla, both of whom smelled like competing department store perfumes and looked at me like I was wearing rags instead of a dress from Holt Renfrew. So, Elise, Aunt Jean said as the flash went off, turning toward me once the cameras disappeared. Anyone special in your life these days? No one currently, I replied evenly, already bracing for impact. Oh, she said, dragging the vowel like it hurt to say. Career women have it so hard, you must be so busy all the time, traveling and all that. She always was a lone wolf, my mother added with a faint smile. Too independent for her own good. But she means well. She's successful though, Uncle Henry chimed in. Right, Elise, didn't I read somewhere that your company made some list? I nodded. One of our products was featured in Forbes. Oh, that's lovely, Mom said with a sip of her wine. But really, what does that even mean in real terms? Are you still living in that little condo of yours? There it was again. The careful myth. I smiled tightly. No, I moved out last year. Oh? Her eyebrows lifted, curious for the first time. Upgraded to a townhouse? Something like that? Technically true. I'd moved into my grandmother's estate last year after buying it from the estate trust, renovated it, paid off the final restoration bill in cash. But if I said historic estate, she'd find a way to twist it. So big, for just you? Or, your poor grandmother would hate seeing it turned into some bachelor pad. So I let her assume whatever she needed to. Well, Aunt Jean said, placing a bejeweled hand on my shoulder, you'll get there. Not everyone finds love right away. And you're still young, in your own way. In my own way? I echoed with a smile. What did that even mean? From across the ballroom, laughter erupted as Daniel lifted Rachel into a twirl on the dance floor. Cameras flashed, people clapped. Our parents beamed like royalty watching the coronation. You know, Mom said, lowering her voice as she leaned toward me. You should have worn something with color. All this dark fabric makes you look stern. I'm not here to be decorative, I said before I could stop myself. She blinked, offended. Don't be difficult. This is Daniel's night. Try to enjoy yourself, even if it's not about you. I smiled at her like I hadn't heard that 1,000 times. She turned away before I could reply. I moved back toward the bar, stomach tight, fingers curled slightly around the glass. Across the ballroom, I caught Daniel's eye again. He looked at me for just a second too long. He knew. He always knew. But knowing and doing something about it? Two very different things. Excuse me, a woman said gently, touching my arm as I leaned against the cocktail lounge's marble railing. Are you Elise Thompson? I turned, caught off guard. She was mid-50s, elegant, with the kind of posture that made you want to adjust your own. I am, I replied. She smiled. Margot Simmons. I'm a colleague of your father's. He's mentioned your name, though not nearly enough, if I'm being honest. I heard you're the one who bought the Langston estate last year? I blinked. Yes, that's right. She beamed. It's one of the most important properties in the region. I toured it once in the 90s during a preservation tour. I heard someone had finally restored it properly, didn't realize it was you. That's incredible. My throat went dry for a moment. It had been months since anyone outside my team acknowledged the work. Thank you. It's been a labor of love. Oh, I'm sure. Your grandmother would be thrilled. Everyone always assumed that house would be lost to developers. But you brought it back. Before I could respond, Rachel appeared at my side, wine glass in hand. Sorry to interrupt, she said sweetly, placing a possessive hand on my arm. Elise, could I borrow you for a second? Mom wants to do pictures with the siblings. Of course, I said, turning to Margot. Excuse me, it was really nice meeting you. You too, she said with a knowing smile. And congratulations, truly. As Rachel and I walked back into the crowd, she glanced sideways. What was that about? She recognized me from the estate. Rachel gave a light laugh. Oh, that old place. I thought your family just kind of kept it in the background. It's mine, I said, sharper than intended. I bought it. She blinked, clearly thrown. Oh, I didn't realize. Most people don't. When we reached the photo setup, Daniel was already posing with his arm draped over our cousin Jake's shoulder. Our mother was fussing with her necklace. Dad stood off to the side, gesturing for more champagne. Elise, Rachel said with a quick smile, already moving to stand beside Daniel. Over here. I joined them. The photographer waved us into tighter formation. Closer, he instructed. Look like you actually like each other. Everyone laughed. I smiled for the camera, lips taut, jaw clenched. They thought they knew everything about me, that I was lonely, serious, unmarried, and overworked. They didn't see the 100-year-old oak trees I walk under every morning, the renovated library I built from scratch with original moldings and hand-selected antique fixtures. They didn't know I hosted charity dinners in the dining room that once belonged to my grandmother. They thought I lived in a condo. A condo. I stared into the camera flash as it snapped again and again, each burst erasing a little more of me. I was there. I was real. But in their world, I'd always be background. Until I wasn't. The ballroom had started to hum louder. Glasses clinking, voices rising, music swelling like it sensed something big was coming. Toasts were soon, I guessed. Daniel stood near the center, glowing in soft lighting like a groom on a magazine cover, Rachel clinging to his arm like she'd won something she hadn't yet unwrapped. I needed air. I slipped through a side door marked, staff only, ending up in a quiet service hallway that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and champagne corks. I leaned against the wall, letting the quiet wrap around me like a balm. And then, voices. Familiar ones. I told you, after the toast, my mother whispered, crisp and smug. It will seem like a family gesture, not a negotiation. I didn't move. I couldn't. Are you sure she won't say anything? My father asked, more cautious. In front of everyone? She won't risk a scene, Mom snapped. She never does. She'll sit there and smile like always. Besides, it's Daniel's night. No one would side with her if she objected. I edged closer, breath tight in my throat. What if she objects later? Dad asked. She won't. And even if she does, it'll be too late. Once we announce the estate is being passed to Daniel, no one will question it. We'll call it tradition. Legacy. The Langston estate was always meant to stay in the family. It's not like she needs it. But she paid for it. Oh, please, Mom scoffed. She has no husband, no children, no reason to hang on to that place. It's excessive. Daniel can build a family there. Make it useful. I didn't hear what my father said next. My pulse was pounding too loud. The hallway spun around me in slow motion. My hands were ice. They were going to announce it tonight, in front of everyone. That the house, The one I bought, restored, bled for, was Daniel's inheritance. A gift. Like it was something I'd been holding onto for safekeeping. I gripped the marble molding on the wall to steady myself. I wanted to burst in, confront them, demand an explanation, scream. But they were right, weren't they? I wouldn't risk a scene. Not yet. Instead, I straightened my back, fixed my lipstick in the hallway mirror, and stepped back into the ballroom just in time to hear the clink of a glass being tapped. My father stood by the mic, smiling. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" The crowd quieted. Cameras came out. Rachel touched Daniel's arm. My mother caught my eye across the room, her lips curling into something between a warning and a smirk. They thought I wouldn't dare. They were about to find out how wrong they were. My heels clicked louder than the string quartet as I crossed the ballroom, each step deliberate, practiced. I had no plan, just a promise to myself not to disappear. Dad adjusted the mic, his face flushed with pride or champagne, I couldn't tell. "Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight to celebrate Daniel and Rachel." "What a blessing, what a joy," he began, his voice smooth and practiced like the businessman he'd always been. "I look around this room and I see faces that have shaped our family, friends, colleagues, and those who've loved our children like their own." The applause came in polite waves. He lifted his glass. "If there's one thing I've always believed, it's that family takes care of family. Sacrifices are made. Gifts are given. Not always in the spotlight, but always with love." I felt it before he said it. The slow pull of eyes, the way my mother straightened her shoulders. Daniel subtly stepped forward, smiling like he already knew the punchline. "And tonight," Dad continued, voice swelling with ceremony, "we're thrilled to announce a special gift from one sibling to another. A gesture of love and legacy, Elise." Every head turned toward me. "Has generously decided to gift the Langston estate to Daniel and Rachel as part of their engagement. The home that's been in our family for generations will now be theirs to build a future in." Applause exploded. A roar of champagne-soaked cheer filled the air. I didn't move. Daniel looked surprised, but not enough. His smile was too rehearsed, his hands already gripping Rachel's like he'd been preparing for this photo op all night. "Oh my God," Rachel gasped, hand to her heart, her eyes already shining with gratitude and entitlement. "Elise, I don't even have words." The crowd turned to me, expectant. Clapping. Nodding. Some even cheering louder now, raising glasses in my direction. I watched them from the eye of the storm, frozen in the applause meant to drown me. Someone shouted, "That's what family means." Another, "She's always been so generous." The photographer started clicking wildly. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue she'd clearly brought for this moment. Dad lifted his glass again. "To family. And to the future." Glasses clinked, flashbulbs popped. The room tilted slightly. My estate, my money, my legacy, handed off like a party favor. I felt Daniel's gaze on me, smug, flickering with caution. He was waiting. They all were. Waiting for me to nod. To smile. To perform. I set my drink down slowly and said nothing. Not yet. Elise, say something." I heard my name tossed like confetti across the ballroom. Applause still echoed off the high ceilings, but now the clapping shifted into expectation. Smiles leaned sharp, voices reaching. "She's so selfless," someone crooned behind me. "Always thinking of others." "It's family," said another. Like that explained everything. "She doesn't need all that space anyway. Besides," a voice chimed from the dessert table, "she's not even married, it's not like she has anyone to pass it to." I felt each comment like a slap. Light and quick, but building into bruises. Daniel came up beside me, grinning like this was all spontaneous, as if he hadn't rehearsed the reaction in the mirror hours before. I don't know what to say," he said, full of faux wonder. "Thank you, Elise, really. This is huge. I mean, Rachel and I never expected this, did we, babe?" Rachel shook her head, eyes wide like a bride on a game show who'd just won a beach vacation and a blender. "It's unbelievable. That house is so beautiful. We already talked about how we'd want to raise kids somewhere like that. It's perfect." A waiter passed by, and Daniel snatched 2 champagne flutes, handing one to me like this was some kind of passing. The torch ritual. His smile tightened when I didn't take it. "You're amazing," Rachel added, squeezing my arm. "This is going to make our future feel real." The crowd circled in. Everyone wanted to witness the next part. The final bow of the quiet daughter. The approval. The polite smile and teary eyes. "Speech, Elise," someone called. "Yes, say something." More clapping, more cameras. I saw phones up, recording, live streaming maybe. Every second of this captured, immortalized, the perfect family moment. The selfless sister. The happy couple. The proud parents. Except I hadn't said a word. And now they noticed. My silence landed like a dropped fork on a marble floor. Small, sharp, undeniable. Rachel's hand slowly dropped from my arm. Daniel glanced toward our father, whose mouth began to flatten. My mother's face hardened, the smirk threatening to crack. "Elise?" Rachel tried again, quieter now. "Is something wrong?" I met her eyes, then Daniel's, and I smiled. But it wasn't the smile they wanted. I turned back to the crowd and raised my voice just enough to be heard over the music. "Nothing's wrong," I said clearly. "But there's been a misunderstanding." A hush fell, not total, but immediate enough to slice through the glittering air. I held their gaze. The champagne flute still sat in Daniel's outstretched hand, growing warmer by the second. And I wasn't reaching for it. "A misunderstanding?" Rachel echoed, blinking like I'd just mispronounced my own name. I stepped forward, just slightly, enough for the mic to pick up the low clarity of my voice. "That estate wasn't a family heirloom sitting in a vault," I said. "It wasn't something passed down or loaned out. I bought it, with my money, after our grandmother passed." Gasps. One sharp, one muffled, someone dropped a fork. "I restored it, paid the contractors, paid the taxes, the deed is in my name." My mother surged forward then, sharp and smiling too wide. "Elise, sweetheart, of course, it was always in your name." "That's not the point." "The point," I continued, not looking at her, "is that no one asked me if I was giving it away." Now the silence was real, palpable. The kind of silence that slows time. Daniel cleared his throat. "I thought this had already been worked out. I mean, Mom said you'd agreed. That it was just a formality." Rachel's face flushed, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. "Your mother told us the paperwork was already in motion, that you wanted to surprise everyone. We even talked about nursery rooms." "Did I say that?" I asked, turning to her. "Ever?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. My mother stepped in, voice sweet and acidic. "Elise, no one's trying to steal from you. It's the family home. It should stay in the family." "It is in the family," I said. "I'm family. Or did that change when I decided not to get married?" That one landed. Aunt Marla actually looked down into her drink. Uncle David's brow twitched. "I think we should all take a breath," Daniel said, hands up, soothing, politician smooth. "No one meant to offend you, okay? It's an emotional night." "For you?" I asked, turning fully to him. "Because I didn't agree to donate my property as a party favor?" Rachel's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. "Okay, I think maybe we should step outside." "No," I said, "we shouldn't. Because the cameras were still rolling, the phones were still up. And for once, I wasn't going to be quiet in the name of peace." "Elise," my mother hissed, stepping close enough for only me to hear, "you are making a scene." I turned to her. "No, Mom. You made it the moment you decided to give away something that wasn't yours." She blinked. Her mouth opened. Then, for the first time all night, she didn't have a single word. I looked out at the crowd, every person frozen, watching, recording, listening. Then I said it. "The estate is not available." And it never was. And the applause that followed was gone. What replaced it was the echo of truth, and the crack that would split this family in two. There was a beat of stunned silence, fragile, like thin glass right before it shatters. Then my mother snatched the mic. She moved with the speed of a woman who'd been preparing this speech for years. "Everyone," she began, her voice already wobbling between control and fury, "let's just take a moment. Emotions are high, and there's clearly been confusion." Her eyes didn't leave me as she smiled at the crowd like she was calming children at a school play. "I want to clarify a few things. Elise has always been passionate, And we love her, we do. But she's also always been very independent. Sometimes to a fault. She turned to me, gaze sharp as a scalpel. She's lived alone for so long, I think she's forgotten what it means to share. To support family without needing to be asked. A few murmurs flickered in the crowd. She smelled blood. And let's be honest, Elise has never really prioritized family. Careers always come first. Nothing wrong with ambition, of course. But there comes a time when you stop chasing promotions and start thinking about legacy. About building a life that's bigger than yourself. She turned to the crowd again, gaining momentum. This estate, this beautiful home, was never just about ownership. It was about continuity. About honoring our roots. And Daniel has always been the one to carry that torch. I saw Daniel shift uncomfortably but say nothing. Of course not. Let her do the dirty work. All he had to do was look sad. Elise was given so much, Mom continued, voice rising just slightly. A private education, full financial support, everything we could offer. And now, when her brother's stepping into the next chapter of his life, she withholds. Publicly. Someone gasped. Another person. Aunt Cheryl, I think, whispered something behind her napkin. She could have spoken to us privately, Mom added. But instead, she chooses this. To embarrass us. To insult her brother. To make this moment about herself. Then she held the mic out toward Daniel, who looked like he'd been handed a baby and told it was leaking. Daniel started, shaking his head, his voice full of pained resignation. I never wanted this to become dramatic. I was touched. I really thought Elise was doing something kind, something meaningful. He looked directly at me now, eyes full of practiced hurt. I guess I misread the situation. The room pulsed with discomfort. I could feel it crawling across the walls, over the crystal centerpieces, down the stems of wine glasses. Rachel rubbed Daniel's back like he was the victim of a tragic betrayal. Somewhere in the back, a phone buzzed. No one reached for it. I glanced around. Faces stared at me like I'd just taken off a mask and revealed horns. Aunt Jean shook her head slowly, the kind of theatrical disappointment meant for stage plays and church pews. I could feel the whispers now. Spiteful, sympathetic, confused. And above it all, the sting of my mother's voice echoing in the mic like a final verdict. She doesn't understand family. But I did. More than any of them. She doesn't understand family. The mic squealed as my mother's words settled like a curse over the ballroom. For a moment, no one breathed. Then it began. First, a cough. Then, a whisper. Then, seriously? Someone scoffed, too loud to be private. She has no idea what legacy means, another voice said from the left. She's always been jealous, a woman near the champagne tower added, not even bothering to lower her voice. I scanned the room, trying to track the cascade. The warmth was gone, replaced by cold eyes and turned backs. A handful of guests raised their phones, thumbs hovering on the screen, streaming everything in shaky vertical rectangles. I saw the red Lives badge glowing on at least two of them. Aunt Jean crossed her arms. This is why no one ever knows what she's thinking. She's thinking about herself, someone answered. Boos started next, low and scattered at first, like someone testing if others would follow. They did. Daniel held out a hand, faux moderating. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be, he said, looking right at me. She's obviously overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. The word hit like a slap. I was standing completely still, not even blinking, while the world spun itself into a frenzy around me. Rachel stepped forward, all wide eyes and trembling lips. Elise, she said, voice cracking just enough. I really wish you'd talk to us first. I thought we were becoming sisters. That was it. That was the moment they sealed the narrative. Rachel as the innocent, Daniel as the wounded son, and me as the bitter spinster who couldn't stand to see her little brother happy. Even now, I could hear my mother's sob story forming in the back of her throat, rehearsing for the sympathy circuit. She's always been difficult. She works too hard. She's lonely. She's not well. I'm fine, I said suddenly, cutting through the noise like a blade. They all looked up. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not confused. I'm not bitter. I'm just not giving you my house. Another ripple. Someone near the front gasped. The older uncle from my dad's side actually chuckled and muttered, "Well, damn." "Language," someone else snapped. "I'm not doing this," I added, stepping toward the stage. "I didn't sign up to be a storyline in your little engagement drama. You ambushed me, publicly, and expected me to smile while you rewrote history." My mother moved to grab the mic again, but I was faster. I didn't need the mic. The room already belonged to me now, broken as it was. "To be clear," I said, loud enough for the cameras, "the estate isn't being gifted, it was purchased, restored. And it is not available. Not for Daniel, not for Rachel, not for anyone." Rachel's face twisted like she'd swallowed something sour. Daniel looked at my father, who looked like he'd swallowed a grenade. Silence fell again. Except now it was heavy. Awkward. Too long. Someone near the back clapped once. Just once. Then stopped. The live streams were still rolling. And I knew. This wasn't ending tonight. I should have walked away. That's what I kept telling myself. But something in me refused. After years of swallowing my pride, I wasn't leaving this time with my head bowed and my voice silenced. My mother stepped forward again, heel clicking hard on the ballroom floor, grabbing the mic with more force than necessary. Her smile was gone. "Elise, stop this," she hissed, "right now." I looked up at her, calm. "No. You're humiliating your brother," she said, louder now. "You're embarrassing all of us. You are ruining this night." "This night?" I laughed once, sharp. "This night was a performance. And I was supposed to play the supporting role." "You were supposed to be part of the family," she snapped. "I am," I said flatly, "but apparently that only counts when I'm giving something." The tension thickened like fog. The guests didn't know where to look anymore. Phones were lowered now. No one wanted to be caught filming what was about to happen. But no one could turn away either. "You're ungrateful," she spat, "after everything we've done for you." I turned fully toward her. "Done for me? Or taken from me?" That did it. She lunged. Not a full attack. Not a slap. But she grabbed my arm hard and yanked me close. Her face inches from mine, her voice low but shaking. "You always think you're better than us," she whispered, teeth clenched. "But you're just a scared little girl who got lucky." I didn't pull away. I let her grip me. Let her words sink into the air. "Let go," I said, my voice so calm it chilled even me. "Or what?" she barked. "You'll run back to that empty house you're so proud of?" I smiled. "I won't run anywhere. But I will make sure everyone here remembers what just happened." That was the moment her hand lifted. Maybe to push, maybe to slap, maybe just to intimidate, but she didn't get the chance. Someone in the front row gasped audibly. A champagne glass clinked to the floor. She froze, palm midair, trembling. The entire room stopped breathing. Daniel reached for her, grabbing her wrist gently but firmly. "Mom," he muttered, "stop." Her eyes darted around, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. How many people had just seen her for who she really was. She slowly lowered her hand. And for the first time in my life, she looked afraid. Of me. Not because I'd hit back, I never would. But because I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I didn't disappear. I stepped back, straightened my spine, and said, loud enough for every phone, every guest, every pair of eyes in that chandeliered ballroom to hear, "You can't shame me into silence anymore." And then I walked off the stage, through the stunned crowd, leaving a silence no one dared to break. The moment I crossed the ballroom doors, the noise behind me became a distant echo. Cheers turned, murmurs turned static. My heels clicked sharply on the polished tile of the hallway, the echo following me like a shadow that hadn't yet caught up. I didn't rush. I walked like the air was mine. Like every breath I took no longer needed to be justified. Behind me, I could still feel eyes burning through my back, faces plastered with horror, pity, or that grotesque fascination people get when something too real happens in a room built for pretending. "Elise," someone called my name. Cousin Trevor, maybe. But I didn't stop. Not for apologies, not for damage control, not for late-coming guilt. A woman I didn't know reached out gently as I passed. "That was brave," she said in a low voice. I nodded but didn't answer. Words were currency I wasn't handing out for free anymore. As I reached the elevator bay, a pair of teenage guests, probably someone's niece and nephew, stood holding their phones. Dude, one whispered. That live's got like 15,000 viewers. I almost laughed. Almost. But my throat was tight and my hands were just beginning to shake. The adrenaline was wearing off, like a fever breaking. I leaned against the wall and let myself breathe. The walls pulsed gently, as if the hotel itself was exhaling with me. They had tried to strip me down in front of everyone. Take what I'd built and hand it off like party cake. Dress it in lace and call it a gift. They thought I'd let them. That I'd sit there smiling, clapping, another trophy in Daniel's glass case. But I didn't. And now they were the ones standing in the shards of the illusion they built. The elevator chimed. The doors opened, revealing my reflection in the mirror panel inside. Hair slightly frizzed, lipstick a little worn. But my eyes were steady. I stepped in and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the ballroom doors through the gap. Still open, people gathered near the threshold, whispering, pointing, watching me. But I didn't look away. Let them watch. Let them finally see me. Because I wasn't the problem anymore. I was the reckoning. The cold hit me the second I stepped through the revolving doors. It was the kind of night air that bit, not with wind, but with quiet. The kind that made you aware of every heartbeat. My car sat across the valet loop where I'd parked it hours ago instead of using the service. Something told me I'd want an escape route. I slipped into the driver's seat, closed the door, and just sat there, my fingers resting on the wheel. My phone buzzed. Messages piled up. Missed calls. Voicemails. Group threads lighting up with chaos. Daniel, Elise, let's talk. Rachel, we didn't know. Please, can we meet? Mom, of course, you humiliated your family. I hope it was worth it. I turned the phone over. Let them stew. I pulled up my encrypted messaging app, the one I rarely used except for business. I didn't want to mix with family. There, under R, was the name that made me sit up straighter, Mr. Renaud. Not just my mentor, not just an investor. The man who'd believed in me before the estate, before the renovations. The one who'd walked me through every clause of the purchase, who'd insisted I include one particular line in the contract just in case, no transfer of property without written consent from owner or legal consequence. I'd thought it was paranoia. He called it foresight. I typed fast, fingers sure. They tried to publicly assign ownership of the estate to my brother at a live event. Claimed I'd gifted it. I did not. Live streamed. Viral. I need a show of force. Tonight, if possible. No settlement. Full assertion of contract terms. I hesitated, then added, they want a legacy. Let's give them one. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, understood. I'll be there in 30. Bringing counsel. I exhaled. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked different somehow. Same face, same smudged lipstick. But something in my eyes had sharpened. I wasn't just fighting back anymore. I was going to win. And they were going to learn what legacy really meant. I didn't expect the lobby to still be buzzing when I returned. But it was. The doors opened, and every head turned like I'd stepped out of a courtroom instead of an elevator. Then they saw who was behind me. Mr. Renaud walked like he owned the marble beneath his feet. At 63, he didn't need to raise his voice. His presence did the talking. Behind him, 2 attorneys followed, briefcases in hand, expressions carved from stone. Evening, he said smoothly, scanning the crowd. Where's your father, Elise? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My parents were already hurrying forward, Daniel and Rachel trailing behind, their smiles cracked and slipping fast. Mr. Renaud, my father greeted, trying for charm. This is unexpected. Renaud gave a polite, dry smile. I imagine it is. Daniel stepped forward. Look, I think there's just been a big misunderstanding. There has, Renaud cut in, eyes like a scalpel. But not on our side. He turned toward the gathering guests, raising his voice only slightly. I'm here to clarify legal boundaries, publicly, since it seems the family chose a public venue to breach them. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Mother's lips parted. That's unnecessary. It is entirely necessary, he interrupted, producing a folder and handing it to one of the attorneys, who opened it with quiet theatricality. Elise Thompson is the sole legal owner of the Langston estate, the younger lawyer began. Acquired through private capital, fully paid, registered, and notarized under her name. No co-signers, no family trustees, and, with a clause, added by Mr. Renaud himself, that prohibits transfer or representation without her express written and notarized consent. Another gasp. Another phone lifted. Renaud folded his hands behind his back. And given that said estate was announced, incorrectly, as a gift tonight, during a live-streamed speech, we're here to assess damages. Rachel paled visibly. Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My mother stepped in. We weren't trying to… Trying? Renaud echoed, calm but loaded. Mrs. Thompson, you announced the forced transfer of a privately owned, high-value estate on video. That's not trying. That's attempting to misrepresent legal property in front of hundreds of witnesses and a live audience. He glanced around the room. Anyone here who recorded the moment, kindly hold on to your footage. We may be subpoenaing content as part of our review. The ballroom shifted. A few guests lowered their phones reflexively. Others began whispering furiously. My father looked like he'd aged a decade in the last 2 minutes. Renaud turned to me, his voice low. Would you like to say anything else? I looked around. At the faces that had turned on me. At the brother who expected me to stay silent. At the parents who always assumed I'd be too polite to fight back. I stepped up. I didn't come here to start a fight, I said clearly. But I'm not afraid to finish one. I met my mother's eyes. This isn't about tradition. It's about control. And I'm done giving mine away. The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier. But it belonged to me. I think the room deserves some clarity, Renaud said, voice steady but unmistakably final. Since so much has been said about legacy and family values, let's tell the truth. He turned slightly, hands clasped behind his back like a professor before a lecture. Elise Thompson is not simply the owner of the Langston estate. She is a senior executive partner at Harlan and Renaud Capital. She holds a 19% equity stake in our firm. She sits on 2 advisory boards and was the lead strategist on a $70 million portfolio restructure last quarter. Whispers erupted like static. That's not possible, someone muttered. My father's mouth opened slightly. My mother's face was stone, Renaud continued. She purchased the estate outright, without loans, without family funds, using earnings from her personal investment growth. And she's protected it under every clause we suggested, including those normally reserved for institutional assets. He turned to Daniel. So no, Daniel, that house is not your inheritance. The room rippled like a bomb had gone off underwater. Daniel looked stricken, pale, like the wind had been knocked out of him. Rachel stepped back slightly from his side. The young lawyer beside Renaud lifted a tablet, showing it to my father. Here is the deed. Here is the trust language. And here is the liability clause. Everything you publicly misrepresented is right here. One of the guests, I think it was a distant cousin, let out a long, slow whistle. And then the phones came back up. Only this time, they were pointed at my parents, at Daniel, at Rachel, at the trio who had built a lie so big they believed it would hold. This livestream has over 30,000 viewers, someone whispered. Rachel looked nauseous. I didn't know, she stammered. Daniel said, your mom told us it was happening. She didn't tell you it wasn't hers to give? I asked, my voice low but sure. Rachel blinked, realizing there was no good answer. Across the room, my father sagged into a chair. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. My mother, still standing, still rigid, said nothing. But her silence was no longer intimidating. It was irrelevant. Mr. Renaud looked at me, calm as ever. I believe that settles the matter. I nodded once. It does. The guests who had booed me earlier now watched me with something else in their eyes. Not pity, not fear, recognition. The live stream kept rolling. And for the first time all night, I didn't look away. Daniel moved toward me like a man trying to reclaim a stage already torn down. Elise, come on, he said, still trying to smile, still trying to charm. You didn't have to do all that. We're family. Exactly, I replied. And that used to mean something. He looked confused, genuinely so. Like he didn't understand why the audience was no longer applauding. I didn't ask them to do this, he said, gesturing toward our parents. They told me it was already decided, that it was yours, but you wanted me to have it. I believed them. And you didn't think to ask me? I asked. He had no answer. Rachel quietly edged away, her smile long gone, replaced by something harder. Calculation, perhaps. She said nothing as she returned to her parents' table, sitting down like a guest at someone else's wake. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, measured, but shaking. You always wanted to be separate, she said, staring through me. You wanted to be better, cold. Above all this, now look what you've done. I didn't do this, I said. You did. When you decided your son deserved what wasn't his. When you assumed silence meant permission. She opened her mouth. Closed it. The weight of eyes on her now, watchful, unsympathetic, wide with the thrill of watching a matriarch falter. You humiliated your own family, she said finally, though it sounded more like a defense than an accusation now. You did that yourselves, I said. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, picking up their purses and jackets. The party was unraveling. No music, no more drinks being served, the string quartet long gone. Someone near the bar laughed under their breath. Best engagement party I've ever seen. Daniel turned to them, angry. You think this is funny? But no one responded. He was talking to a room that no longer cared about protecting his ego. My mother's voice dropped lower, bitter. You think you've won? I looked at her. I didn't come to win, I said. I came to stop losing. And that's what this was. Not revenge. Restoration. I turned away, stepping down from the figurative stage they built for Daniel but tried to chain me to. Behind me, the party continued dissolving. No speeches, no first dance, no slideshow. Just whispers and ruined plans. And in the middle of it, my mother stood still, watching the house of cards she built sink into the marble floor. I stepped through the ballroom doors again, but this time there were no whispers behind me. Only the soft shuffle of coats being gathered, drinks abandoned, heels clicking toward exits. The party was over. For good. Outside, the cold had thickened, turning the night into crystal and breath. I kicked off my heels before I hit the marble steps and carried them in one hand, the other still holding my phone, dark now but heavy with missed calls I'd never return. The valet line was nearly empty, except for a black sedan idling near the curb. Mr. Renaud stood beside it, speaking quietly to one of his lawyers. When he saw me, he gave a slight nod and stepped away from the conversation. I hope you don't mind that we made things public, he said, tone softer than usual. I was counting on it, I replied. He smiled faintly. For what it's worth, he said, reaching into his coat pocket, I've only seen 4 people stand up to a room like that. 3 of them were in Congress. One just bought her family back in full. He extended his hand, not to shake, but to offer something small, a black embossed card with only one line on it. Elise Thompson, Principal, Langston Advisory Group. You're already a brand, he said. Might as well make it official. I took the card and slid it into my coat pocket without looking at it. Behind me, the doors of the hotel opened again. Guests began to trickle out, some glancing at me, some pretending not to. But one. A man I didn't know, older, maybe a distant cousin or a stranger, raised his hand and clapped. Once. Then twice. Then a third time, slower. And then others joined. Quietly. Not celebratory, not loud. Just acknowledging. It wasn't applause for a performance. It was recognition. I didn't turn around. I didn't need their cheers. But for the first time in my life, I walked away from my family not to escape, but because I no longer needed anything they refused to give. Not love, not approval, not a name, mine was enough. And now, they'd never forget it. The house greeted me with silence. Not emptiness, just stillness. The kind that doesn't press down but lifts you up. Like breathing in a cathedral where no one's watching. I dropped my keys in the crystal bowl by the front door. The sound echoed up the curved staircase, through the hand-painted crown molding, across the old floors that once creaked under my grandmother's slippers. The Langston estate wasn't a house. It was proof. I padded barefoot through the halls, my heels forgotten in the car, the cold stone giving way to warm, reclaimed wood as I stepped into the library. My favorite room. Walls of dark walnut, a fireplace flickering low, the scent of aged paper and sandalwood curling around me like a shawl. I crossed to the writing desk near the tall window and sat. The chair gave a familiar groan. The same one I'd heard every night for the past year while I reviewed contracts, drafted investment memos, and filed permits to protect the very house they tried to steal. I pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the drawer and began to write. Not a legal document, not a resignation or an apology, but something closer to a truth they'd never hear because it wasn't for them, it was for me. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build when no one's clapping. It's the silence you survive, the voice you reclaim. They thought they'd write my story with their hands on the mic and mine tied behind my back. They forgot who paid for the ink. Outside, the wind stirred the ivy that wrapped the stone walls. No one was coming to congratulate me. No one would throw confetti at the truth. But I didn't need applause. I had architecture. I had firewood that snapped when it burned. I had original floors that remembered every footstep I'd taken in defiance. And I had my name, etched in deeds and glass, no longer hidden behind my brother's shadow. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it between the pages of a book no one had touched in decades. Then I leaned back. No more performances, no more waiting for permission. Just me, in the house I built, alone, yes, but never again invisible. The podium was nothing special. Scuffed wood, a single mic, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee someone had left behind. But when I stepped up to it, the room went quiet like velvet. Rows of folding chairs stretched out before me, packed with local families, small business owners, teachers. A few journalists stood in the back, cameras low but ready. The same media outlets that had once covered Daniel's fundraisers and my parents' charity galas now pointed their lenses at me. Funny how fast the story changes when the ending isn't what they expected. "Thank you for being here," I began, voice steady, clear. "Some of you know me as Elise Thompson. Some of you may only know the version of me whispered about in church aisles and boardrooms." A light chuckle rippled through the audience, soft but understanding. "Well, today I'd like to introduce myself properly." I paused. Let it breathe. "My name is Elise Thompson. I am the owner of the Langston Estate, a partner in Harlan and Renaud Capital, and starting this spring, I will also be the founder of the Langston Initiative, a grant and mentorship program for local entrepreneurs, particularly women, who are building something out of nothing." Now the room responded. Applause, murmurs of approval. Not polite. Real. I know what it's like to be underestimated. To be told you're too quiet, too focused, too independent. To have your success questioned, your silence mistaken for surrender. I looked out across the crowd. At a former teacher who once asked if I was just a workaholic. At a neighbor who told my mother I was not built for softness. "I'm not here to prove anything anymore," I said. "I'm here to invest." Not in headlines or handshakes, but in the people who, like me, were overlooked while everyone else was being celebrated. Someone near the front wiped their eyes. A journalist raised a hand. "Ms. Thompson, will your family be involved in the initiative?" I smiled. Calm. Measured. "No." A few eyebrows rose. "This is something I'm building on my own. With partners I chose. With people who saw me when I wasn't on a stage." I stepped back, leaving the mic for the next speaker. The applause swelled, not out of shock but respect. Outside, the sun warmed the steps of the community center. Reporters scribbled. A woman with 2 kids shook my hand, saying nothing but gripping it like I'd given her something invisible but real. And as I walked back toward the Langston estate, my name on the banners behind me, one thing was finally, absolutely clear. I hadn't just taken my power back. I'd turned it into a foundation. The garden didn't bloom like it used to. It bloomed harder. Vines clung tighter. The roses reached higher. Even the gravel paths held their shape with a kind of stubborn pride. I walked barefoot along the stones, coffee in hand, morning sun slicing through the trees that had watched me cry, plan, and rebuild. Everything here had roots, deep, messy, unseen. Like me. The chairs were still set out from last night's community gathering. Just 12 of us. No cameras, no speeches, just real conversations, the kind I never had with my own family, the kind I'd stopped hoping for. The Langston estate used to be their story, their symbol. Now it was mine. I sat on the bench near the wisteria trellis, the same one my grandmother used to sit on during summers, her ankles crossed neatly, a book in her lap she never quite finished. I used to think she was lonely out here. Now I knew better. She was free. I tilted my face to the sun and let it wash over me. No expectations, no scripts, just quiet. In the distance, a delivery truck rumbled toward the gate. Supplies for the new mentorship office. A project built out of my own spine, my own scars. I didn't flinch anymore when the past knocked. I just opened the door, looked it in the eye, and chose what stayed. The house didn't creak the way it used to. Maybe it had settled. Maybe I had. My name wasn't a footnote now. It was the headline. And as the wind rustled through the ivy brushing against the stone walls like a blessing, I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I would never be who I was before it began.